Hello and welcome to The Sharpening. I am your host, Josh Peck. We have a very special guest for you tonight, a first-timer on The Sharpening, to talk about an exciting work of fiction he has recently released. Dr. Michael Heiser is a scholar in the fields of biblical studies and the ancient Near East. He is the scholar in residence at Logos Bible Software. Mike earned the MA and PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic languages at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2004. He has also earned an MA in ancient history from the University of Pennsylvania in major fields of ancient Israel and Egyptology. He is the author of The Facade and The Portent, which will be the topic of tonight's show. So all that being said, I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Michael Heiser. Mike, how are you doing?
Very good. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to out of your busy schedule to come on the show and talk with us about your book. It's a phenomenal series so far. I really like what you've done with this.
Well, you trust me, it's fun to write too.
You can tell reading it that you had fun with it. So since it's your first time on The Sharpening, we have a little bit of a tradition here. Every first timer, the first question is, can you give us a rundown of your testimony?
Sure. Yeah, I was not raised in any sort of Christian environment. My parents would like to deny that, but it's true. Just nominal at best. I mean, we never went to church. I never heard anything about the Bible or anything like that. It was really through the influence of a friend when I was 9 who lived next door to my grandmother, where I spent a lot of time, that through him and his family, I first heard the gospel. But I became a Christian really through their influence. I mean, she was a single mom. She had 4 kids. 2 of them had cystic fibrosis. I mean, they just struggled mightily. But they were good testimonies. And again, through a variety of contacts and doing things with them and, their family devotions and, going to this or that event, I eventually heard the gospel when I was in high school, 10th grade. I became a Christian, and it created an interesting dynamic in our house because whereas before there had been no interest, now there was hostility. So I have sort of an interesting journey as far as a believer. Not being allowed to go to church sometimes, not being allowed to take a Bible to school, even though we had a Bible as lit class. And just strange stuff like that. When I was in college, my grandma called me. She was living with us at the time. She was sort of our in-house mole, or my mole. And she said, "You probably better not come home because your mom and dad are going to take your car, so you can't go back to school." I was in Bible college.
Oh, wow.
Just all sorts of strange stuff like that. So I didn't come home for break. But I think all of it. I mean, I'm really appreciative of it. I think it prepared me for lots of things in lots of different ways. So I'm grateful, for the sort of having to be in the valley for a lot of years before you sort of emerge out of that. So I'm actually quite grateful for it. They're believers now, but it took over 20 years.
Wow. Wow, that's yeah. Sounds like it had to have been
I have great stories, let me tell you.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Well, I'll just one more comment. My parents, years later, after they became believers, told me that they used to do things and say things to me just to see what I would do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's kind of maybe under the surface that's kind of a good thing because I bet that kind of helped that helped prepare you and be able to know what to say when people bring up certain things. I bet.
Yeah, and people who are they'll throw this and that at you and thinking that you're going to be intimidated. It's like you have no idea, dude. You just have no idea.
Oh yeah, I mean because we got to deal with this on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I mean, constantly, defending the faith and all that stuff, and yeah, stuff like that comes up. Wow. Yeah, I was raised in a Baptist Christian, household, so I didn't have a whole lot of practice, like coming against or defending against naysayers and stuff like that. More of that came in my adult life, and but yeah, that's awesome that you had that you had the practice at least.
Yeah, and it as I progressed, further in terms of biblical studies, you get. I always loved theology. I was good at school. I was interested in anything old and weird, and the Bible just sort of fit right in there.
Yeah.
But just the challenge of I was the boring kid. And this comes through a little bit in the novels too, where because I'm essentially the main character, at least emotionally, and in terms of his issues, his self-esteem issues. He's essentially me in high school and college, and just having to sort of navigate lots of different things. But it just there in my bed, one night after hearing the gospel, even though I was the good kid, the boring kid, I never rebelled against my parents except after I became a believer. Then I had to rebel in the other direction. But
Right.
it was just one of these things that I didn't have to be convinced that I had offended God, that I was lost, because I knew I wasn't perfect. What else could I be other than somebody who falls short?
Yeah.
Everyone falls short of the glory of God, and understanding the gospel, salvation had nothing to do with my own merit. That those weren't difficult questions for me. It's just I had never really been forced to think about them, and then of course had not been exposed to Jesus and the whole, really, the gospel. What it actually was.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, yeah. For me, it was something I was born into, but later on, I fell away from it, and then I sort of had, I don't know if it was an exact salvation or re-salvation or
Yeah,
what it was. I guess
who
like a,
cares really?
yeah, exactly. It was like a rededication, I guess. But yeah, ever since that time, I never turned back. I guess a lot of times we have to reach that point where it clicks, where we realize, oh, I have offended God just by being who and what I am, just being human. And that, that doesn't mean that God's just this angry person up there waiting to strike you with a lightning bolt or something. It's, there's a way out of it. It's just by our nature,
Yeah,
you
there's a
know.
clear difference between him and you.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's pretty elementary.
Yeah. And that's what's so great about the gospel too. It's because even though we are so far below him, he still loves us enough to not only die for us, but I mean that in of itself, but provide us with salvation in a way that we can get back to him, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, most people, who are hostile to the gospel, I've found, including my parents. I mean, when they start throwing stuff at you, it's not because they want information.
Right.
It's there's some issue of personal pain there. There's some perceived threat. There's some underlying reason for the hostility. But you know, some of the most hostile people. If you just ask them, look, what I don't, can you explain this for me? Why is it that you would hate a God who loves you?
Yeah.
Who sent his. I mean, if the Christian story is true, God sent his son, the incarnation. He's here to die. He didn't do anything wrong. And if you were the only person who was here, he would have done it for you. Can you explain to me how it's rational to hate that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that's actually a good way to jump into things with certain people, because it helps them articulate really what's wrong.
Mhm.
What they're angry at.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of times, well, some of the time, it'll come back to, well, I just don't believe in all that, and then it's like, well, where's all the where's all the animosity coming from then? Why, if you don't believe in it and you think it's just a fairy tale or whatever,
Yeah.
why are you so hostile
If it's
towards it?
harmless, why are you so angry?
Exactly, and then yeah, and those are good ways to find out, what happened in that person's past to cause some kind of pain, to make them feel that way, because that doesn't just happen on its own. There's something
Yeah.
causing it.
Yeah. After you find that out, at least in my case, and it's like, well, you got to tell me what's bugging you, because we can talk about maybe a really poor, flawed theology of evil that you're struggling with
Right.
later. But if we're going to have a discussion, I have to know what it is that's bugging you.
Yeah, and that sometimes is the hardest thing to get out of a person. And what's nice too is I find the people that are actually genuinely seeking, there really is no hostility or anything. They just have questions, and so it's pretty easy to tell just by how people will frame the question or how they start the conversation about it, whether they are actually on the verge of accepting it, or if they just need more information, or if it's something that they are against for some kind of pain, and then you gotta kind of play therapist for a little bit, but it's worth it if they end up accepting it.
Yeah, and the novels, there's a lot going on with both novels. To me, writing a novel is like writing a thesis or a dissertation. It literally does take me a year to do research for any one of these, but fundamentally, it's not. It's true what it says on the covers. Everything. Every historical person, every text, every government document, it's all real. I mean, that isn't just marketing shtick.
Right.
That is actually true of the book, and the book is their academic and intellectual journeys in many ways. I mean, I cover lots of ground in the books, but fundamentally, they're really about things like redemption. They're about things like providence. Really, big picture sort of concepts that we can all, sort of understand at some level and struggle with because it's what life is. And so, one of the characters, the lead female character, has really significant anger issues.
Yeah.
And so, part of the story is just having her come to grips with who she is and what was done to her and how she's responded. And so, I use the other characters, especially the main, male character to sort of move that along, and a lot of it reflects, things I've seen happen with people in real life too.
And I think that's one of the things I love most about these books is that they're not oversaturated with all the Christianese and all like the church language or anything like that. It's
Yes.
easily
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Because there's so much Christian fiction out there that's like that, and that's why I don't really read much Christian fiction.
Yes.
Because
And you shouldn't.
it's unbearable. It's the same reason why I don't listen to a whole lot of Christian music too. It's the same. It's just the same stuff over and over again. But with these, it's it's easy to relate to on a human level. And I think even when I was reading through these, I thought, okay, if I was a non-believer and I just happened to pick these up, because I'm a fan of science fiction and I read through them, there's nothing in there that would really like put me off immediately or make me think like, oh, this is just a Bible thing. Let's get rid of this. It's easy to relate to, even if somebody, I mean, I would assume, I don't know because I'm not a non-believer, I am a believer, but I would assume a non-believer who's a fan of science fiction could read this and still get something out of it, but even have that door to Christianity that the church always wants to slam closed, have that open, and that might actually be a way to reach more people. I mean, I've even I've bought copies of these books myself and given them to people that I know that are non-believers, who in hopes that it might trigger something. So I mean, it's a phenomenal work. And something I wanted to ask too, you tackle a lot of fringe topics in the Facade and the Portent, like UFOs, Nazis, conspiracies, all these things that I love. I'm a nut for that kind of stuff. But what is it that caused you to write a book on those subjects?
Well, that's actually not an easy question because there are so many subjects touched on in the books, all of which interest me, and the books that follow will pick up certain of those threads. And there's so much else that I can get into. But I think the appeal of that, I mean, I've always had an acute interest in UFOs. Initially, I guess you could say I was sort of a lurker. You read books about this kind of thing now and again, but there are a few things that you read or a few things that you see that sort of deepen the interest. In my case, it was the 1997 50th anniversary of Roswell CNN press conference that really drew me into the subject in a serious way, because it was the Air Force's third explanation for Roswell, which alone says something.
Yeah.
And Colonel Haynes at the press conference going on about how the stories about bodies were explained by crash test dummies, and then thankfully there was at least one journalist in the audience who had done some homework and knew that by the Air Force's own prior report that the test dummies hadn't been used until the 1950s, the early 1950s. And this was 1947. Hey, we're sitting here at the 50th anniversary of an event, and it's 1997. Do the math. And when he brought that up in the press conference, I thought that Colonel Haynes, who was an Air Force colonel, would say, "Oh, you're right, I misspoke. Sorry about that," and backtrack and explain, what he was talking about. But he didn't.
Huh.
He said, "We think that all the witnesses associated with the Roswell event." I mean, it was so bizarre. I went and got the transcript. So we think that all the witnesses associated with the Roswell event underwent time compression.
What?
And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, what is that? And the reporter actually took the words right out of my mouth. Like, what is that? And he said, well, we think that all the witnesses were testifying in the early of an event that actually occurred in the early 1950s, but they thought that they were remembering it as 1947.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, it was so ridiculous because, there are a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
That are involved. This isn't like two people. And so I listened to that, and as soon as he said that, I thought, you know what? For some reason, the Air Force wants this myth to live.
Yeah.
It serves some sort of purpose. There is something to be gained by keeping this thing alive. And that was really a turning point for me, because it was the absurdity of it in public. I mean, this is CNN.
Right.
Okay. Just the absurdity of the statement really convinced me that there was something to look into here. And that's when, I started to get into Operation Paperclip and some of the technological stuff that the Germans were into. And that material is featured in both books. We should say really what the books are about. I mean, for those who don't know it, the Facade, which is the first book, really focuses on the question of what would the impact on traditional Judeo-Christianity be if there was a genuine extraterrestrial disclosure, that this was something real, it was something undeniable, it had official backing. What would the impact be on people of faith and the whole idea of the Judeo-Christian worldview, who God is, who we are, all this kind of stuff. And the character is confronted with that question through a series of strange and really circuitous and providential really events in his life. And then the second question is, well, what if we thought disclosure was something worse? Something that a greater intelligence that was using the idea of disclosure to manipulate people. And that thread is picked up in the Portent. I mean, you must read the Facade before you read the Portent, because the Portent presupposes the whole story.
Yeah.
And so in the Portent, I got to play the part in my head of intelligent evil. And basically it was, okay, if I were the intelligent evil mind and mastermind running this show, what would my end game be? And how would I get there? And again, the portent, the word portent means, it refers to something looming out in the future, or an omen, some signal, some foreshadowing of what is to come. And so the portent, again, takes up that extraterrestrial thread for different reasons. But in the Facade, it really focuses on what's going on in ufology during World War II, or early Cold War era on up through the UFO craze as we know it now. But there's an intelligence to it. Again, going back to the CNN press conference, someone wants this myth to live, and there's a reason for it, or reasons for it. And we find out in the book that evil does not have a monolithic singular agenda.
Right.
There are competing agendas. There are competing agendas at the human and at the divine level. The powers of darkness and human evil, such as it is, everything has their own agenda, and more than one agenda. And so that you can't track on one thread and one thought, because they intertwine, they intersect, they go in different directions. And the Facade is really about directions and misdirection and so on and so forth. By the end of the book, the reader knows more, of course, than the characters do.
Yeah.
And in the Portent, some of those ideas are picked up on, where the the characters begin to get a glimpse of what the future portends. Mainly not because they're so smart, but mainly because intelligent evil has singled specifically the main character out as wanting him to know what's going on because he's entertainment. There's a scene in the Portent where, again, the evil mastermind behind the whole thing tells Brian, who's the main character, look, there's half a dozen different ways we could get to where we want to go. We're picking this way. I'm picking this way because it's the way that allows me to make sure that you suffer.
Yeah.
And as soon as I lose interest in you, then I'll kill you. But the fact that you're alive should inform you that I'm entertained. You're here for my entertainment, my indulgence. And I want you to know what's going to happen because when you see it happen, you'll know it's all a sham, but you will be able to do nothing about it. And the things that you care about the most are going to just wither and die. And I don't want to get too far into that, but it's more than just the people he knows. It's really targeting Christianity on a scale and in a way that will really amount to believers forsaking the truth and never knowing they're doing it.
Right.
Thinking that they're embracing the truth while they're forsaking it. And so the Portent, again, creates one scenario. Again, if I were intelligent evil, how would I want to pull this off? Killing people isn't sufficient, especially if they're Christians. That's just a ticket to heaven. How do I get them to forsake the faith? There are no Baal worshipers in heaven, regardless of what they say. And he knows, the evil mind knows that Brian understands that and believes it and agrees with it. And so that becomes the question, how do we get people to embrace something thinking they're embracing the Christ, Jesus? And they'll just be unable to know and discern that they're not. They're embracing really something that is the polar opposite.
Yeah, and I think that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sure.
I think that's one of the most horrifying things in the book, and something that really surprised me in a good way. A lot of times, I mentioned how Christian fiction is kind of, I don't know, diluted maybe, especially when they, in a lot of other Christian fiction, when they try to explain evil, because it's usually this cartoonized.
Yes, it's cartoonish.
Yeah, and it's not really believable. But the way that you portray it in these books, it's like I could really see that. It's more bone chilling because it's more real.
Well, ideas mean something, and the mastermind understands that very, very well. It's about planting ideas and moving herds, and again, just very good at that, because again, that's the history of the human race. I mean, it's nothing terribly profound, but it does replace the cartoonish view of evil. Frankly, a lot of Christians have I think gullible and naive perceptions of things like end times and evil. I'm not talking about a simplistic notion of an antichrist here.
Right.
This is much bigger than that. In fact, the evil character tells Brian, look, we're going to give Christians exactly what they expect. Okay, because when we give them what they expect, but it's not what they think it is, then they will be where we want them to be. We will get them to move from this idea to the next idea, to the next idea, to the next idea, until we move the herd to where we want them to go. And they will be making, quote unquote, faith decisions that are antithetical to what the God of heaven really wants and is really at. But we will essentially use your expectations of the Bible against you in intelligent ways. Again,
yeah.
that you will not be able to just pick out. And again, he says to Brian, I'm telling you this because when you watch it happen, you'll be the person who knows what's going on. And you will be the still small voice that no one listens to. because you'll sound like a raving lunatic. And you will not be able to do anything. And I want you to just get up every day and know what's going on, because you're going to suffer. And I enjoy that. There's just, again, this dynamic in the book, but it's deliberate on another level too, because I want, again, a lot of what goes on, about not just end times, but biblical thinking, biblical theology, just generally, what circulates in church is really simplistic.
Yeah.
It lacks depth. It lacks exegetical moorings. And I in the book, I want people to at least consider that, there's something here that we really ought to think about, or there's something here that we've embraced that I don't know if it's really coherent. I want to, in my books, I want to try to get people, again, exposed to more serious biblical scholarship and biblical theology, to, sort of ignite a little bit of interest, a little bit of passion, to go out and do some real studying and real research in these things. But again, Brian, because Brian is essentially me, this is his field. He's a biblical scholar by training. Basically, he's out of work, like most biblical scholars are. But in his case, there are just a number of other tragic things that have cost him. Usually his own naivete of just trying to do the right thing, trying to tell people the truth, basically he gets kicked in the butt every time, for doing that. But he's content to do it because he thinks it'll just be okay, and this is what he should do. And again, that comes a lot from my own, background, that I don't really understand this. This looks horrible. I know I'm going to get punished for this, like, growing up in my own home, but I'm just going to do the right thing. And if God's really in this, it'll somehow turn around.
Right.
It'll somehow be okay, even though it's just going to hurt like crazy and for a long time. I just should do this, not really knowing how it's going to work. And Brian has paid for that in significant ways.
Oh yeah.
And he's quite marginalized, but again, through providence. Providence is a huge theme in both books. He winds up being at the center of this, and is really one of the few people who can sort of understand it. But again, the intelligent evil opposing him understands that as well.
Yeah.
And wants to make a game of it.
Yeah, so. And I think that the intelligence that you put in the evil, I think is something that is really not done as much as it should be in Christian fiction, or even really Christian nonfiction. Just as you kind of hinted at before, that we, I think a lot of times we kind of think of the enemy, or the devil or whatever, as this cartoonish kind of guy bumbling around that, but we think that we know better because we're Christians, or we have God, or whatever. But really, the enemy's been around for a long time, and he's incredibly intelligent. And I think that us kind of thinking that he isn't might even be part of his plan to let him get away with more stuff. But that's one thing that you really expose in the book, is really how intelligent our enemy really is, and that's not something that's seen a whole lot in the church. So that was one thing I definitely appreciated. So what made you decide to take the fiction route rather than going nonfiction? Because I know, like, for my books, when I get done with all the researching, I just want to put it out there and just get it out. By the time I'm done with researching, I'm about done with the book. I don't want to deal with it anymore. But you took the fiction route, which I tried writing fiction a few years ago. I'm not very good at it, and it's way, in my opinion, way more work, and it's a lot more difficult than nonfiction. So what made you decide to go fiction instead of nonfiction?
Well, when the facade was born out of my own sort of burnout. I mean, I had just, I'd gone through my doctoral program. I took my doctoral exams, which are, in our case, was a ritual hazing. It was just, they were ridiculously and absurdly hard, but that was the intent. And, you get on the other side of that, and I didn't want to write my dissertation. I mean, I had a topic I wanted to do, but it's like I just needed a break.
Right.
And so I had the time. One of my jobs in grad school, I had 4 or 5 jobs while I was in grad school. One of them, though, was third shift security. So I had lots of time to do homework and stuff. The trick was, of course, staying awake, both during the day and at night. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a break. And I always wanted to write a novel. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to abandon my dissertation. And I figured it would take me a year. So I'll blow the first year and just do this. And it was such a wonderful diversion, but it was also, again, an academic exercise that it was entertaining and challenging in the right sort of way. And so I wanted to deliberately try to telegraph and lay the groundwork for the breadcrumbs out there for certain, ideas, research ideas that I was actually going to pick up in my dissertation anyway. And so it wasn't entirely lost, in a year, because I had to read a good amount of stuff and form, thinking in my own mind. But it was really the divertive aspect of it. And once I was in it, it just became fun. And you're right, it is harder. I would say writing fiction is harder than writing nonfiction, but for me, it's actually not a burden or less of a burden, because let's just be honest. You get to be God.
Yeah.
And there's just something about creating characters and sort of knowing the end from the beginning but then you have to stay true to the characters. You can't, again, this is the way I usually put it in interviews. Look, my fiction is Christian in the sense that it deals with biblical material, of course, in its own context, in its original context, and it's going to take you into theological questions. You're going to have to think about things, but the Buffy is not going to marry the pastor's son right before the rapture,
right?
Okay, and an angel isn't going to swoop in to save the day. Okay, I am not doing formulaic, cartoonish Christian fiction.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. I want it to be real, but I want there to be a point to it too. And for a lot of people, I blog now. I wasn't then, and I've done lots of other things. A lot of people will not have the patience to sit down and read a nonfiction book, even if it's really well written.
Yeah.
About an academic topic. But you can communicate those ideas in a story, and if the story is a good one, then it's mission accomplished. And so those are really the two reasons behind going the fiction route. Like I said, initially it was a diversion, but once I got into it, it's like, man, this is just fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like I said before, you can tell too. And I like that. The way that these are written, it's not forcing anything down your throat. But I think that these have more theology in it than really just about even a lot of nonfiction books. This just has more substance to it. What was your approach to adding theology into books such as in the science fiction genre? And did you find that to be a challenge?
Well, what I do, what my method is I use an online sort of flow chart, whiteboard kind of piece of software, and I plot out, okay, here's the weird technology I want, I'm interested in possibly putting into the book. Here are the theological questions, the theological, rough points or difficult passages that I want to, have the book deal with in some way. Here's the conspiracy theory stuff I want to do. Here's, I make lists, and then I plot things out like in a flow chart, where I keep track of what happens in every chapter, specific lines, specific ideas that are planted that I can pick up later. The first one I outlined. The second one I did, it was more of a little free floating. I more or less just took it a chapter at a time. But I knew key intersection points through the story. But I mean, just think about it. You've read both books now.
Yep.
In both books, just think about the topics that I hit on. It's UFOs, of course, but it's UFO documents. There's the HARP project. There's panspermia. There's not Nazi technology, Nazi occultism. You get into the portent, and it's not just prophecy. Okay, there's Vedic origins. The Aryan mythology. just crazy stuff. Again, high technology, German nuclear, research that people seem to have forgotten to history. All sorts of different, things. Really, the ancient astronaut idea, what the occult roots of that are, that's part of the portent. The whole, I show how Aryan mythology and the Aryan occultism of Nazism, how those two things are together. Specifically, how did they de-Jewify Jesus? And I don't just state that they did these things. I'll actually take you into the research into how certain passages in Scripture were interpreted, and why they were interpreted that way, because of archaeological stuff, because of an issue of grammar. I mean, I actually take you into there isn't a point in any of these books that does not derive from serious peer-reviewed scholarship. And if anything, to your listeners, that ought to scare them.
Yeah.
If nothing else does, because the ideas are misguided for, again, any number of reasons. And again, when the characters get thrown into this stuff, and it's not just Brian. I mean, there are other people who have, specialties and areas of deep interest where they have to sort of unravel this and address it in some way, or at least be prepared and to help prepare other people, for what's coming down the road. But you get to see again how, if I were intelligent evil and I was master of all these domains, I had all this domain knowledge, what could I do with it?
Right.
And it's about making people think thoughts that I want them to think, because if I get that thought in them, they will be ready for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And you get into all sorts of bizarre technology. All the technology in the books is, quote unquote, on the books. This is stuff that's being discussed, at Harvard and MIT. I mean, and most of it's beyond theory, but it's scaled down. I mean, they're doing these things on a small scale. Synthetic biology is a good example of that. It's just a matter of time before these things become part of our mainstream life.
Right.
And again, if I had really sinister motives in these very specific areas, what could I do with this? How would I use it to make people believe something? And again, it's not this cartoonish, kind of thing where I'm gonna fake a rapture. I'm gonna put a saucer on the front lawn of the White House. I want things that if you saw them in the paper tomorrow, they would be believable.
Right.
And by the way, you'd probably think, well, I read that in the Portent, didn't I? Since it's been published in August, I've had 5 or 6 things. I've seen 5 or 6 things in the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
That were in the book. I mean, I actually blogged that a week or so ago, sort of like an update. Well, here are 5 or 6 things that are in the book, and guess what? Newspaper stories on them. And that happened with the facade too.
Wow.
It's not because I'm a prophet. It's just because that this is where I go for my information. I want things to be real. The only thing that's not real in the books is how I connect the data points, to propel the story. And again, how I might apply a technology. Maybe somebody hasn't thought to apply it this way or that way, or I need to scale it in some way. But everything in the book is real.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's it really helps drive the books along, and it helps really stick these things in the reader's mind, and kind of gets the reader to think about these things. A lot of times in Christian fiction, with when they'll talk about what the enemy is doing, or something, it'll usually be kind of just on one track, or it'll be one thing towards one objective. But you get into a lot of different things, which is great. But it does all connect. And what's really interesting is you actually get to learn about not only biblical theology, but the theology of
bad theology.
Exactly, the theology of the enemy too, which is good, because we need to know about that, so we can kind of self-reflect and see, well, do I have any bad theology in me?
I want readers to think about what they believe. Now this one isn't from the book, but I'll just throw out an example that I could use later on, or maybe I won't use, but let's just say that this whole notion, and this was current really in the 70s. I remember it distinctly growing up. It's not as current now, even though you'll still run into it. This whole idea of interpreting Gog and Magog as Russia.
Right.
which has no exegetical basis at all. But in the book, I wouldn't have the characters or the evil guy say, "Well, we need to debunk this." No. But the evil guy would ask, "Well, that's interesting. How could I use that?"
Yeah.
What since a large segment of the population that I hate believes this, how might it be useful? And so that's the kind of thing that I do in the book, because again, as the evil mind behind it, I want you to believe something, and the easiest way to get you to believe it is I'm going to use something you believe already.
Yep.
And then I'm going to move you inch by inch toward where I want you to go. And when you're there, you're still going to be thinking that you believe what you need to believe and ought to believe and must believe, and you just ain't going to be there.
Right.
You just are not going to be where you think you are.
Yeah, and we see that nowadays in the church too. I mean, I've known brothers and sisters in Christ that have kind of fallen away from the church because of this ancient astronaut thing, and that I know that's something that you deal with too, and without giving too much away of the story, can you tell us about some of the beliefs that drove the side of the enemy and how that connects with UFOs and the ancient astronaut theory?
Well, the ancient astronaut theory is really based on certain old occult mythologies that were articulated on a wide scale in the 19th century. And not coincidentally, also by fiction, either sci-fi or supernatural horror fiction in the same era. So what in the portent, I mean, they have to, again, start thinking, we need to start thinking how our enemy is thinking. And in order to best do that, in order to see why this happened over here and why this happened to us over there and why we ran into this thing over here, we need to start unpacking what it really is that drives this belief system. And then once we understand that, we can speculate, we can guess more intelligently as to where it might go and what our enemy might do with this sort of thing. So I expose the reader again to things like theosophy and Ariosophy, which is 19th century theories about where we get the races. A lot of that is in turn based upon bad Bible interpretation, overly literalistic Bible interpretation.
Right.
Which really shocks a lot of people, but it's a very easy thing to track if you understand, if you care about the intellectual history of the 19th century. I mean, because even before that, just a quick way of understanding this, or for me to explain what I'm talking about here. When the age of exploration started happening, Columbus, and then in the 1500s, after him, well, lo and behold, Europeans had inherited the Judeo-Christian theology. They had also inherited the Bible. And the Bible didn't talk about countries like South America and North America and, the poles. They didn't talk about China and India and places like this. And as European explorers began to spread out and discover the globe, especially crossing the Atlantic, and they started running into people, it's like, where did they come from?
Yeah.
Because if you actually read what people expected to find, I don't know if any of your readers have ever read Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, part of the Chronicles of Narnia, or seen the movie.
Yeah.
And you have these people like that have 1 foot that's huge, and you have giants and all these grotesque. That comes right out of the quote-unquote academic literature of the late Middle Ages.
Oh, wow.
This is what people thought. And Lewis was a medievalist, a medieval scholar, so this is what he's drawing on.
Right.
This is what people thought they'd run into. They thought they'd run into creaturely beings that were not like Europeans. Well, they didn't. They ran into human beings. Now, they might have different skin color. Of course, they have different culture, different language. But it raised the question of, where this wasn't in the Bible. What do we do?
Right.
And this, again, is the same era when you get Darwin, 1859, Origin of Species, all this sort of stuff. And so what happens is that Europe, intellectually, there were people there who this was the best thing since sliced bread, because now we're not only discovering new people, we're discovering new languages and literatures, like in India, different accounts of human origins, different accounts of the whole, how humanity got here, the whole world, everything. And so it gave people a wedge against the Bible. It's like, this is great. We're gonna dump the Bible. And it was not coincidental that it was the Jewish view of origins.
Right.
And they began to use it as a tool, again, to attack Judaism, Christianity, the Bible itself. And they also had to come up with racial theories for why there were different races. And it was very convenient for Europeans to just say, well, look at us. I mean, we're the most advanced people on the planet. Our racial stream must come from, the real God or the best God or something like that. And the Jew over here must be like just the leftovers, just human debris.
Yeah.
Well, Christians were falling into that too, because they had a choice to make. They could either say, well, we have to dump the Bible, or we're going to come up with they didn't put it this way, but this was the result, wacky Bible interpretations to force these discoveries into the Bible somewhere, rather than just doing what they should have done and saying, look, let's just take the Bible what it is. It's an ancient Eastern Mediterranean, ancient Near Eastern document. This is the worldview of the writers. God used them. He knew what he was getting. It was God's decision to inspire scripture at this time, place, culture, blah, 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 blah. It's what it is, but God knows that the message behind it is going to be something that pertains to everyone. So the Bible was written for everyone, but not to everyone.
Right.
Simple things like that we can see clearly today. They didn't then. And so you come out with, this is where you get, this is why people defended racism for so many years, so many centuries in Europe and America, using the Bible, because we have to account for where these other races come from, where these other people come from. And so it's this weird amalgamation of wacky theories about race, wacky theories about distant lands. You get the whole Atlantis thing kicking in here. You get the Darwin thing kicking in here. This is where ancient astronaut theory is born, because ultimately the best race descends from, in 19th century religious and occult literature, from God or the gods, depending on your perspective. And surely we must be the most like Adam. We're the Adamic race here. Where these other people come from? They were put here by other beings or whatever. And it just becomes this free-for-all in the 19th century. And I take the reader through, elements of this in the Portent as they're, again, trying to figure out, what is this guy up to? Again, the person that is the central evil character, what could he possibly be doing with this stuff that we're running into, or that he's throwing at us, or just sort of laying out there to mock us? I mean, what is he thinking? And so we go through all that kind of stuff to really start whittling away at the agenda that the evil one has chosen, and why he would choose it, and what he wants to gain by it. As bizarre as it looks, it will converge together and make sense to the right audience. And so that's really what the Portent is about.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really good way to address the whole ancient astronaut theory that's really growing in popularity nowadays.
Well, I'll tell you what my big concern is. I see too many Christian quote unquote researchers adopting ancient alien thinking, and they basically just baptize it.
Right.
They Christianize it in some way, and usually that's Nephilim stuff and all this kind of thing. But again, if again, sort of the intellectual history of ancient astronaut theory and ancient astronaut theory itself, you can see that you can see what, again, other and I'm not saying that they're on the take or they've got sinister motives. I just think that they lack a certain framework, but they're looking at people's experiences or whatever, trying to respond to ancient astronaut theory, and instead of just saying this is bunk, okay, and here's where it comes from, and here's why it's bunk, and frankly, this is what I do. I insist on using primary sources.
Yeah.
I don't care about this researcher said. Show me the source. I don't care about, oh, this lab had this, skull or this thing tested and we got DNA from it. Really? Show me the tests. Where's the research published? I want the name of the scientist and I want the name of the lab because I will go check it. All right. And usually that kills discussion, both in the Christian world and in the secular world.
Yeah.
Because I will not do this by hearsay. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's current information or if it's ancient texts. I insist on primary sources, and I insist that conclusions and assertions that are given are put out for peer review, because other people who are experts in the field, if they look at it and come to the same conclusions and repeat the same test, well, then you got something.
Exactly.
Then I can't look at you and say you're making it up or you're idiosyncratic or you're missing something. Okay, 2 heads are better than 1. That's all peer review is.
Right.
And 10 heads are better than 1. That's all it is. And if you want to cry persecution and, I'm so brilliant that they won't understand me, or my conclusions are so controversial they won't look at them, that is just garbage.
Right.
Because I live in that world and I know that is garbage. What that tells me is that you're afraid of the process. And I insist that you not be afraid.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a problem with a lot of other people that, I think that instead of, I think what happens is somebody, say a researcher or something, they'll start with the conclusion and then go back and try to prove it.
That's precisely what does happen. And look, again, I'm not saying that this is a sinister thing because, the problem in the 19th century was, what do we do with other people and races? Okay. Well, the problem now, like, people will have an anomalous experience, or they'll watch Ancient Aliens on TV, or they'll read a book and they wonder, like, well, how do I fit this in with the Bible?
Right.
It's the same question. It's just packaged by a different subject, different orientation. And so, yeah, again, I've been to UFO conferences as a speaker and as an attendee and lots of different things, since the publication of the Facade. And for Christians, some things, even as simple as watching Goofy Giorgio with his ridiculous hair on Ancient Aliens, that actually threatens their faith.
Yeah.
And so what they have a decision to make. Do I went to my pastor and my pastor thought I needed therapy. My pastor asked me, why are you watching that show? Instead of getting an answer from a source they trust, if they don't do that, then they've got a decision to make. I either jettison the faith, I'm out of here, or I need to somehow make it fit. And they'll come up with the strangest, wackiest biblical interpretations to make it fit. And at the very least, they stay in the faith. I mean, I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
But the problem with it is they don't realize how similar to occult theology it is.
Right. Where
their landing is like, in the room next door to theosophy and Nazi occultism. I mean, they're basically like roommates now. They just don't realize that. And it really sets them up either for something that they'll read or encounter that they'll think, well, you know what? I could stay with how I'm Christianizing this, but over there, my roommate actually, I think, has a better explanation for this.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of 6 of one and half dozen another. What does it really matter if this is how I look at God now, as opposed to this? That's the danger in it. So I think it's ultimately counterproductive, even though I understand it. And again, a lot of it is just, we have to do something here to help people process information. But my solution to all that, again, as I said a few minutes ago, is just different. And yeah, okay, I'll admit it's part of being a scholar and being trained as an academic, but I just think it's more effective. I insist that you show me your work.
Right.
If you don't do it and you don't show your work to others and you are not working in primary sources, then that just tells me you are afraid to do so.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're setting people, up to, well, just take my word for it. It's there, well, and then you get into like Zechariah Sitchin kind of stuff. Where...
Yeah. He just popped into my head. The classic example of this is Sitchin's Anunnaki nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why. And it's boring. It's as boring as watching, paint dry. Okay. But if you go to my website, this is why I did it. I made a screen capture video of Mike going to the electronic cuneiform text database of Sumerian literature, and I type in the Anunnaki, the word as the database spells it, and I click the button, and I get all the tablets where the Anunnaki are referred to, and show you how to get English translations, so that you will know that Sitchin's core ideas about the Anunnaki being from Nibiru, which is a planet beyond, Pluto, and it comes here every 3,600 years, and all of this is garbage.
Yeah.
Okay, you do not have to take my word for it. I want people to watch that boring video and repeat the search, just so that they can tap into the primary sources. They do not have to depend on Mike. They will know that this is nonsense. Now I don't know how effective that is, but it's illustrative of what I insist.
Yeah.
What I insist on. So, there's nothing like asking people to show you their work. You'll either get the material, and that's a good thing, because okay, well now I have something to look at, and I'm gonna evaluate what you're doing here. And if it's an area I don't know, like all this DNA stuff, I have geneticists who are friends.
There you go.
They do answer their emails. I send them this stuff. I want the lab report because I know a real geneticist, and he'll tell me if this is up to snuff or not. I do that kind of thing. And that's really what we need to do. We need to hold their feet to the fire and say, instead of trying to adapt this wacky thing to the Bible, and cramming it into the page of Scripture somewhere, or creating a baptized version of it, we need to hold their feet to the fire and say, put up or shut up. Because when I go on a show like Coast to Coast and say, look, I'm telling you, I'm speaking to 10 million people now, and I'm telling you that there isn't a single line in a single cuneiform tablet that says what Sitchin says. How easy would it be if that wasn't true to produce one and make Mike go away?
Right.
How easy would that be? And I have been preaching that sermon for 10 years now. Actually closer to 13.
Wow.
Okay, and I'll go on to a show and I'll say that. I'll say, look, make Mike go away. If you don't like what I'm saying, make me go away. Send me the line.
Yeah.
I am promising here on Coast to Coast AM that I will post it on my website for the world to see that I'm wrong. But I'm telling you, I'm not wrong. Because I have looked, and you can look too. You don't have to take my word for it. That's the kind of thing we ought to be doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what I find so mind blowing is how easily this stuff is accepted. Like like ancient astronaut theory, it's accepted with no evidence. I mean, there's no testing. People will watch a show on the History Channel, and I guess because it's called the History Channel, they think that it's actual history, and they just take it for what it says, and they don't really test it, even if it goes against their faith in God. And like I've said before numerous times on this show, I've known people personally who have fallen for that. They've gotten to a point where they're so into this ancient astronaut thing that leads to New Age and Gnosticism and all this other stuff, and they get so entrenched in that they find themselves in a place where they're denying the Jesus that they used to have faith in.
Well, it's still Jesus, Josh. We're still talking about Jesus, aren't we?
Oh yeah.
Can you say Jesus?
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things too, is to show them, like, look, you're Jesus. You may call him that, but he is completely different from my Jesus.
All Jesuses are not ontologically equal.
Exactly. Vast differences. I mean, there's one group of people that think he was a mushroom. So how does that fit? And not exactly. So not all Jesuses are equal. And but yeah, I mean, it just blows my mind how easy and it's not even really, when you look at it, it's not really that convincing of a lie, but people still fall for it like it is. And I mean, personally, I've never really been too successful in bringing anyone back from that, but it blows my mind.
There are a lot of reasons for it. There's a cultural peer pressure.
Yeah.
A sort of a cultural beatdown in the whole notion of claiming that what you have is true and its competition is not. So there's a political correctness, cultural beatdown element. There's a being bored with church element.
Yeah.
Church. The Bible seeks to be fascinating when it's always about John 3:16, or always about marriage counseling, or always about a character sketch of some guy that you've heard about since you were 3 years old.
Right.
The level of content dispensed in churches today is frankly pathetic.
Yeah.
And it does more harm than good. I think people in congregations are habitually underestimated in terms of their tolerance for real content.
Yeah.
There's that problem. There's a laziness problem. People are, well, if I have to think about this question, I mean that's just going to take me weeks and months, and it just sounds like work. Well, in the words of the eminent Greek lexicographer Friedrich Donker, the work of scholars is not for sissies.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's work. It is, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and when you get into it, it can be fascinating. It is fascinating. There is so much okay, for example, the ancient astronaut, interpretation of Ezekiel's vision in chapter 1. That, to me, that's boring compared to what it really is.
Yeah.
Like when you take the Bible for what it is and read that thing, and it's like this exists, like this is a thing that exists. It's mind blowing. That to me, that's way more fascinating than UFOs and aliens on another planet. That's just kind of whatever. But reading and that's just one example of many throughout the Bible. But reading that, and I might be a little hung up on the Ezekiel thing because I deal with it in the book I'm working on now, but. You read it for what it is. That's so much more fascinating than anything you'll ever hear on the History Channel.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's just a lot of reasons for it. I mean, hey, people follow televangelists too. Yeah. How do you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. And something that you touched on too is I think that a big part is that the church doesn't want to deal with these things, like these more supernatural elements to the Bible, which is kind of dumb, because if you read it, you can't have the Bible without that stuff. Why do you think the church as a majority tends to shy away from a lot of the supernatural themes that you actually tackle in your books?
Yeah, my upcoming book, The Unseen Realm, which should be out in March. People can follow me on Twitter, or follow my feeds on my homepage if they want to keep up with that and get the announcement. But this is really what the book's about, this question. And I think that the short answer is that it's because we're moderns. Right. And yes, people are Christians, and they I'm not saying that their profession is false. They're genuinely embracing, God and a Trinity and the incarnation of Christ and the virgin birth and all this stuff. But they don't jettison that because they need it. All right. If you didn't believe those things, why are we even having a conversation about being a Christian?
Right.
But the other stuff, they feel compelled to filter through the modern way of looking at the world, which is it scientific? Is it rational? Does it violate my sense of human reason? And it's easy for me to look at that and listen to. I've had people tell me that and think and say, well, what's so rational about the virgin birth? What's so rational about the Trinity? What you're doing is you're being selectively supernatural.
Right.
Because you have this inner sense that I need this to be that. But everything else, it reflects a struggle of being a Christian and being a modern person. And I understand that. But I think your theism is too small. I think your understanding of the Bible and the coherence and simultaneously the incoherence of everything just being only material, of that being the only reality. I think that your grasp of these things and your vision of these two things is too small. I think your imagination is too small. there's no necessity to be selectively supernatural. Now, I'm not saying that when we look at the Bible that the most wacky supernatural interpretation is the best one.
Right.
Okay, what I'm saying is the people who produced this thing that God chose to produce it were not moderns. Okay, they're not talking in metaphor all the time for the things that make us uncomfortable. That isn't what's happening. But unfortunately, we've come to a point, and again, it's partly understandable just because of the world we're born into. We're born into the modern world, the scientific world. We've come to the point now where we have to ask ourselves, well, how much of what the Bible says about the unseen world, the spiritual world, how much of that do I believe? Conversely, how much of that do I feel comfortable dismissing?
Right.
And still call myself a Christian? Now, that's an uncomfortable question. And that's why when Unseen Realm comes out in March, there will be people who read that thing and say, where has this been all my life? This is just the best thing since sliced bread. And then there will be other people who hate it with an equal passion. And, we're just going to see where the chips fall. It'll be an interesting exercise. But I just think that we as modern people just have a reflex to go away from this. And frankly, a lot of the theologians we read, and I'm talking about people like Luther and Calvin, and the dirty little secret is that they were more modern in their thinking than the biblical writers.
Right.
We tend to think that the correct context for interpreting the Bible is the history of Christianity. It's not. The history of Christianity is a foreign, pardon the pun, alien context to the Bible. The interpreting the Bible in context is not about the Roman Catholic Church. It's not about the Church Fathers. It's not about the Reformers. It's not about the Puritans. It's not about evangelicalism. It's about nothing modern. Okay, the correct context for understanding the Bible is the one that produced it.
Yeah.
And the one that produced it was chosen by God. So, yeah, they have weird ways of putting things, and their worldview is quite a bit different than ours. And some of that stuff might make us feel really uncomfortable, but guess what? That's the one that produced it. So you're either going to read your Bible with the ancient person in your head, or you're going to have somebody else in your head. And there's only one correct worldview through which to filter the content of Scripture. But people, they don't do that. They're not taught to do that. It's scary to do that. And again, we have this modern sensitivity against doing that. And people aren't taught to really think, I believe, think correctly about what the Bible is and how it came to us and what God's purposes were with it. We have a very modern and tradition-laced view of this thing we call the Bible. And it just works itself out sometimes in unfortunate ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I really couldn't agree more, and that's a really good way of putting it. How are you looking on time? Do you have time to answer a couple people's questions?
Yep.
Great.
I've got about 10 minutes. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that should be enough. Yeah, before the show, for those listening, I put up a post on Facebook. See, so it does pay to have me as a friend on Facebook, asking, telling people I was doing this interview today and asking if you have any questions. Feel free to send them my way, and I'll if we have time, I'll ask. And quite a few have responded, so that's awesome. And we'll do this with future shows too, because I like the idea of having this show be a bit more interactive. This question, actually somebody sent this question as we were talking. We'll just use first names. Darnell asks, isn't the Divine Council still actively involved in our present day lives?
Yes, because the Divine Council is just God and his heavenly hosts, those divine beings who are loyal to him and who work for him, and they're not in rebellion. And God uses human imagers and non-human unseen imagers in our life in providential ways to further the kingdom.
Absolutely. Chris asks, what are your thoughts on the serpent seed theory? It's been all over the place the past few years. Or past few days, sorry.
Past few days. Well, I need to ask which serpent seed theory.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. It just says serpent seed. Yeah, there are
If
a
this was
couple.
the notion about Eve cohabiting with the Nakash, the serpent, I don't think there's any exegetical basis for that. If that's what he means, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would be
There's more than one quote unquote serpent seed idea.
right. Yeah, that would be my best
Now,
guess. He didn't
now,
specify.
now think about that. Why was that question even raised?
Right.
I'll tell you why. Because of the discovery of different races.
Oh, yeah.
That is where that question comes from. That was one of the proposed, I think, goofy answers as to why we have people that look this way and live in this place, and then we have other humans that the Bible doesn't know anything about. Okay, that whole problem thrust upon, again, Europeans who had inherited the Bible and the biblical worldview ultimately led to co-Adamic races and pre-Adamic races and different explanations for human bloodlines. That question is part of that discussion, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But now it's part of it's a thread that you'll find in Ancient Alien stuff.
Yeah.
We've just baptized it now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's especially when they talk about like reptilians and things like that.
Sure. There's not, to quote Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
It's just different contexts.
Andre asks, what are your thoughts on the lion-like heroes of Moab from 1 Chronicles 11:2? Are they something like centaurs?
No.
All right. He asked another one. I think this is branching off from that. Were there fallen angels / Nephilim on Earth after Noah's flood? And how did they? If so, how'd they get there?
But yeah, the short answer is buy my book when it comes out in March. I don't know what the / means because Nephilim were not fallen angels.
Right.
That's a conflation that, again, Sitchin is famous or infamous for, but it's not original to him.
Yeah.
Basically, you have different options for how you get Nephilim after the flood, because Numbers 13:33 clearly has the link back to the Nephilim for the Anakim. And one is the flood was a localized event, a geographically localized event covering the ancient Near East, but not the globe. Another possibility would be, and this, you can make a grammatical syntactical argument for this. In Genesis 6:4, when we have, and that Nephilim were upon the earth when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and all that. You could translate the asher clause there, not just as when, but as whenever.
Oh, okay.
And so there could be the suggestion of, hey, this happened later on and it was the same sort of deal kind of thing. The third explanation is you actually had some member of Noah's family, quote unquote, infected with this bloodline. The whole idea of Noah being pure in his generations. The word there for generations, dor in Hebrew, is almost never used of immediate family. It's used of the time in which one lived, the people living at that era of time. Now, I say almost never because there are two passages where dor is referencing family relationships. And so the notion that Noah's purity extended to his family, and that's what Genesis 6, 9, and 10 mean, that's possible, but it's also unlikely if you just go with the usage of that term in the majority of its contexts. Interestingly enough, there is one strain of Judaism. And by the way, Judaism is kind of like Christianity. Ancient Judaism was kind of like Christianity is today. There's lots of varieties to it. There is no one ancient Judaism or one ancient rabbi said. There's like 50. Okay, so one of those does have Noah as a giant. There are texts, rabbinic texts that speculate that. And the reason they're speculating is this precise question.
Right.
So, that tells you that people understood that Dor does not refer to immediate family. But then they also, make the leap that the only way we can explain this is that Noah was somehow a giant good guy. Again, there's no exegetical basis for that, but it just shows you that people were wrestling with the question.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting topic, one that it would be easy to do an entire show on just that.
Now, I've got I've actually got 6 chapters in the book that deal with the giant question before and during the flood, and then during the conquest. So I spent a lot of time on this question and other questions.
Awesome. Now there's one. Do I want to do this to you? All right, there's one very dedicated listener of the Sharpening. Are you familiar with Johnny from the Iron Show?
Johnny from the Iron Show?
Yeah. Well, no, he's a friend of the show. I've been on his show once or twice, and he's been on mine. And he has some really deep and thought-provoking questions. So I hope that we have time to fit all of these in. Dr. Mike, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color is purple.
Oh, good deal. Mine's blue.
Dark purple.
Awesome. Yeah, mine is dark blue. Do you like biscuits and gravy?
Yes.
Me too. What's your favorite popsicle flavor?
Boy, that's tough. It's been so long since I had a popsicle. Probably cherry.
Did you ever have a pet duck?
No.
You're lucky.
My wife had a pet goose, though, if that counts.
Oh, man, I would say it does. They don't have very nice temperaments. My grandparents had ducks, and they were awful. Horrible creatures. Have you ever... This is the last one. Have you ever owned a cat?
Yes.
And he also makes note here, which is actually a trick question because nobody can own a cat.
Yeah. Well, I'll give him this. I would agree with that. As I think one of my friends here at work put it best, where he said that the difference between a dog and a cat is the dog gets fed and watered every day, and the dog looks at you and thinks, "Wow, that must be God." The cat gets fed and watered every day and thinks to itself, "Wow, I must be God."
Yeah, I have cats myself, and that is a very, very accurate statement. Well, that's your introduction to Johnny. He's a good guy. We love him to death. If people want to know more about you or order your books, where can they go?
My homepage is DR, as in doctor, DRMSH. Those are my initials. drmsh.com. So if you go up to drmsh.com, there will be links in pull-down menus or a slider to both books, The Facade and The Portent, and lots of other stuff that I'm working on, lots of other websites. I've got about 10 websites and different things and blogs, and my podcast, my Naked Bible podcast, will be coming back in February. This is the first public announcement of that, by the way.
Oh, great.
So lots of stuff, to look at. The blog is easily searched. So anything you really want to know, you can find at drmsh.com, and you can subscribe to the RSS feeds to get updates, because when books publish and things like that, I'll announce it there. Or you can follow me on Twitter, and it's at MS Heiser.
Awesome. Does this is just my own question. Does the S stand for Scott?
No, it stands for Stephen.
Because I saw your main character's name and I thought, oh, my middle name is Scott.
Brian Scott, the namesake for the main character, is my friend when I was 9 years old that I was telling you about. Who lived next door to my grandmother, who introduced me to the Lord.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I thought.
And he has read the book.
Oh yeah, does he approve?
Yeah.
Good deal.
He knows he's the main character, or the namesake, anyway.
That's really cool. Yeah, my middle name is Scott, which is why I was asking. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, unfortunately, it does look like we're about all the time. Getting tongue-tied now. All out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your new book. And when your next one comes out, if you're interested, we'll have to have you back on.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, that sounds like a phenomenal book. What is it called again?
It's called The Unseen Realm, and people can go up to my website, and the table of contents are there. The first three chapters are there in unedited form, but basically that's what you're going to get in the book. And then there will be a light version of that. Unseen Realm is an academic book. There will be a light version, maybe a third of the length, called Supernatural, that is supposed to come out at the same time. It might come out a month later, but the big one, the one with all the data in it, is going to come out in March.
Fantastic. Well, people will have to keep their eyes open for that. And yeah, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun.
Right. Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Again, that was Dr. Michael Heiser talking with us about his book, The Portent. I highly recommend all of Mike's work. I certainly myself have learned a lot from the material he has out there, and I have no doubt you will too. So all of that being said, we are all out of time, so I want to thank you so much for listening to The Sharpening. I am your host, Josh Peck, and as always, take care and God bless.